Oh hey, it's Wes, and today it's time to talk about my newly updated macro photography dream team. What am I talking about? If we rewind just a little bit, I made a previous video about this, the Iwata GL-01 LED panel. And it was my intention to replace off-camera flash with just a continuous LED light for macro photography, kind of run and gun style at a wedding. But unfortunately I found that this light was just a little bit too weak to do what I needed to do, running with narrower apertures, handheld, with a macro lens. So I'm talking f4 to f5.6 most of the time. And so this just didn't cut it. Next thing you know, Aputure got in touch with me and said, hey, we've got a light that we want you to check out. And I was like, sure, why not? You're like, here you go. And I thought, is this a light for ants? This light is so small. It's so cute. It's so small. And I thought, there is no way that this light could be bright enough to do what I need to do. Then additionally, Boling got in touch with me. You might have seen this in other videos before. It's the Boling P1, a highly versatile light. And I thought, what do I need an RGB light for? Let's get into it. So the Aputure AL-MX is a highly compact LED light panel. As you can see, it's designed with dense power in mind. What does that mean? Well, we have, like all of these LED panels, a built-in lithium-ion battery, but this one, unlike a lot of them, has heatsink fins on the back. And this is actually quite heavy. I would say that it weighs about the same or more than the Boling P1. Maybe it feels heavier because it's so compact. But what really surprised me about the Aputure is that it actually has more power output than this Iwata, and in most circumstances, more power, more light output than this much larger P1. And incidentally, at max power, using the booster, it is exactly the amount of light that I need to do my macro photography for weddings. You're going to see some image samples up here. So the AL-MX has some very uncomplicated controls on the side here. You have power on and off, and a dual function mode where you're either controlling the color temperature or the light output. Now the color temperature from this only varies from 2800 to 6500 Kelvin. That's a-okay when it comes to just normal photography, not trying to create any strange circumstances or interesting colors. So it's just well enough to match any ambient light that's around you in most circumstances. It doesn't have a fancy screen like the Iwata does on the back, or the Boling P1, which appears to have actually almost the same screen. It uses USB-C charging, which is an advantage over this Iwata, which only uses USB-B micro. And the power output for this is surprisingly consistent right across the spectrum. So if you have this all the way up and you're shifting from 2800 to 6500, power output stays the same, even though it's actually sliding between a different mix of LEDs while it's doing it. Speaking of sliding between LEDs, my biggest annoyance with this thing is if you hold down one of these buttons and want to change settings rapidly, just slide on through, it doesn't do that. You have to keep tapping the buttons. Just a little annoyance, but I tend to try to get through things pretty quickly, and so I expect when I hold down a button, it'll just keep going. And then I add to the other side this Boling P1. Now that we have RGB lighting, there's a new way to take ring shots. Now that I can fully control the light coming out of this, the color of the light, I can create some pretty interesting ambient setups for macro photography work. And thankfully, when I hold down this button, switching the RGB color or the color temperature, it just slides on through. Very smooth and convenient. Remember when I said that the Aputure had a consistent power output throughout the spectrum? This does not even remotely. So I was measuring just the exposure from my camera of the output of these two lights, and the Aputure would light up little Groot here, so that I would expose at ISO 100, f1.8, with the max power boost, I was up to 1/2000th of a second. Without the boost, 1/1600th of a second. Still a lot of light, very close though. However, on the Boling, at 8500K, just a warm color temperature, we're looking at 1/1250th of a second. At 2500 to 5000K, 1/1600th. Not a huge difference. But if we put this on red, just straight up RGB red, this thing will go all the way up to 1/2000th of a second. The same brightness as this, but only with the straight red LEDs on maximum. Very odd. Then if you're shooting green out of this thing, it will only go to 1/800th of a second, so less than half the amount of light output. And then, what's worse, is blue, and the blue LEDs on this are even dimmer, 1/640th of a second. So for macro work, I find that the blue actually isn't bright enough to really make things pop, so a lot of the time I'll lean heavy on the greens and reds on my setups. But if I get it close enough, I can make things a little blue, and especially if I shift the color of the aperture towards the warms, it makes the blue look even bluer on this. Okay. Why would I want to use two completely different things? Well, it has a little bit to do with the accessories in the setup. Ironically, the Aputure comes with this gigantic box, and the Boling comes with this little box. Both very solid packaging, needlessly so if you ask me. The Boling came with a little cold shoe adapter, Aputure, an even nicer cold shoe adapter. And we also get another cold shoe adapter. But what the Aputure came with is this surprisingly nice pouch to store it in, which is way bigger than this LED light. The Boling, however, came with a little belt-mounted pack that exactly fits that. I've already lost it because I didn't use it. What I do use is this lovely little pouch that came with the Aputure, where in a previous video you might have seen, I put my LED string lights that I use for effects, I put in the Aputure, and I put in the Boling. And next thing you know, this is my LED light kit for macro photography. Obviously, Aputure probably didn't have that in mind when they put this giant pouch together. Giant by comparison, small in actuality, but works great for me. So this is now my dream team setup for wedding macro photography. It's compact, it gets out of the way, I can set it up real fast, and it's not super distracting. Generally these days, at the reception, I'll just go off into a corner, take some pictures of the rings with some pretty things that I find there. Hopefully I can find something meaningful to put them with, and then get back to the action. We need the lights to be a little bit higher, just use one of these cheap little half tripod things. As a last little roundup, which of these is better? Well, first we'll want to take into account price point. The Aputure is $149, the Boling $159, and the Iwata, well, that's $100, but honestly it doesn't have the light output of these two, beautiful as it is. The Aputure does not have a built-in diffuser. As nice as the diffuser is, magnetically attaching, not nearly as janky as the one for the Iwata, like this thing, it does fall off, and it is a little bit inconvenient. The Boling, however, has a built-in diffusion panel, not as thoroughly diffused as the Aputure, but it certainly works. Additionally, it has this, what I originally thought was crazy, but entirely functional, articulating arm that allows you to set it up without having an outside tripod, or attach it to a tripod or a light stand in just about any way imaginable, making it super versatile. And then, in the control scheme for the P1, we have separate buttons and switches for the light intensity and for the light color. Add to that the completely unexpected and, for many people, unnecessary program modes, where this light will simulate lightning, it will simulate police or ambulance flashing lights. So this is a full-on video powerhouse unit right here. And you can see an example of that in one of my previous videos where I was playing a salty sea captain in a lightning storm. It's hard to explain, just watch it. It's a good video. So this little guy right here is crazy versatile. Battery life. Honestly, I've had no issues with battery life with either of these. I find that it does last longer, both of them last longer than the Iwata. I'm generally shooting for 5 to 10 minutes, and I'll only charge them about once a month. I don't worry about it at all. They both have reasonably accurate battery gauges, so it's not like they're going to sneak up on you and run out of power. As far as build quality goes, the P1, although it is quite nice with a metal border, there's a lot of plastic here. Whereas the Aputure, this thing is solid. It is all metal and built like a tank. So in many ways, I feel like the Aputure is designed as more of a professional tool. I'm pretty sure that I could drop this down the stairs and I would be much more worried about the stairs being dented and damaged than this thing breaking. Whereas the P1, I'm not sure exactly how many bumps and bruises this is going to take. Good build quality to be sure, but not on the level of this Aputure, which is just ridiculously solid. So there you have it. These are my new 2 favorite lights for macro photography. I know, they're mostly designed for video work. As such, they came with those cold shoe mounts. But versatility is great, and they are definitely doing the job for me, and I'm happy with them. If you have any questions about these things or have any experience to share about them, let me know down in the comments. If there are any other lights that I should be trying instead of these, you think these are junk and there's something better, again, let me know down in the comments. I'm just a guy looking for something that works. And if you want to know what this thing is, and what it's for, stick around for the next video. Things are going to get interesting. So, until next time. Go take some photos.